You're listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with host Doc Martin. Stay tuned in or call in. You won't want to miss what's happening next. How do you step into your maximum potential? How do you connect your spiritual drive with your physical path? Stick around as Doc Martin takes listeners on a journey through the seen and unseen, the accepted and the unbelievable. Get ready to meet the maximum you the world needs on Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin now. Hi, everybody. I'm Doc Martin here with Maximum Medicine. So when I think about maximum medicine, I think about all the ways that we can achieve a healed state, many of which aren't covered in mainstream medicine. And so I've been exploring, and our guest tonight has helped show me the way, consciousness, reality, how do we make changes in our destiny? How do we land on what appears to be a most unexpected and miraculous outcome? And Joseph Selbie is back with us tonight. And you may remember he was one of the founding members of the Ananda community in California a long time ago. He is a teacher, a deep meditator, and he has written books, and we interviewed before on his book, Physics of God. And tonight we're going to talk about the physics of miraculous healing. And what I love about this is Joseph knows how to put the science together with the spiritual and the mystical. And so let's just step right in. Hi, Joseph. Thanks so much for coming on board.
Thanks for having me on again, Sharon. I look forward to it.
So we talk about miracles because in so many life challenges, people want something desperately to change. Something's really bad. It's not tolerable, whether it's finances, whether it's finding a wonderful companion. And in my world, it's about how do I shift this, what looks like dangerous and scary health problem. And your book goes right to the heart of that. So let's talk a minute about miracles. And you share some examples in your book of people who were miraculous. Tell me more.
Well, I start with that in the book because I think for many people, they have a hazy feeling about whether miracles are really possible, or that if you took a hard look at what someone is calling a miracle, you would find that it has a rational, material explanation that modern medicine could endorse. So what I looked for in my research were stories of miraculous healing that are impossible to be explained just by today's model of modern medicine. So one example that some of your listeners may already have heard about is a near-death experience by a woman named Anita Moorjani. And she wrote about her experience in a book entitled Dying to Be Me. And in her retelling, she was basically at death's door. She had lymphoma. She'd had it for quite a while. She had visible tumors on her body. Her lungs were filled with fluid. And her doctors told her family that she didn't have long to last. And they recommended that she go to the hospital for end of life, put her in a funeral. And in the ambulance, she fell into a coma. And that coma lasted for 30 hours. While she was in the coma, she had this amazing out-of-body near-death experience. And in that experience, she realized that it was her own emotional life, particularly driven by fear, that had actually created her illness. She was not so much afraid of dangerous things, but she was afraid of doing the wrong thing. She was afraid of not pleasing those that she cared about and loved the most. And it made her very, very anxious about everything she wanted to do and did. But she saw that that fear had very slowly but definitely created her cancer. But she also realized in that same near-death experience that love was the answer. Love was the cure. And she was deeply immersed in divine love, deeply immersed in a oneness of love beyond anything she had ever experienced. And it allowed her to just let go of all fear. When she came out of her coma, she rallied very rapidly. And within a couple of days, her tumors had gone away and she was feeling energized. Fluid in her chest was gone. And within 3 weeks, she was out of the hospital. So she attributed her miraculous experience to that realization that by living in love and by feeling love, she could heal herself. Another story, this one is kind of a cautionary tale about the power of our beliefs about our own health. So this one takes place a while before Anita Moorjani. This is about a man named Mr. Wright, who W-R-I-G-H-T, Mr. Wright, who also had lymphoma, also was very far gone in an advanced state. He was in the hospital. And while there, he read an article about a chemotherapy drug that was being trialed called cribiazin. And he got very excited about this drug because it not only was aimed at his condition of lymphoma, but it was being trialed in the hospital where he was a patient. And so he asked his doctor, Dr. West, if he could get in this trial. And initially, Dr. West was very reluctant to have him come into the trial because essentially he was too far gone. They were looking for people in earlier stages of lymphoma who had in their opinion, a much higher chance of responding to this chemotherapy treatment. But Mr. Wright was so enthusiastic about the possibility of getting it and the possibility of a cure that Dr. West finally allowed him to be in the trial. And so on a Friday, he gave Mr. Wright an injection of cribiazin. And when Dr. West came back on Monday, Mr. Wright was ambulatory. His tumors had gone away. His fluid in his lungs was gone. And he was in energetic health. And so much so that a day or two later, he checked himself out of the hospital, flew himself home in his own plane, and was seemingly 100% cured. Now, Dr. Wright was baffled by this to no small degree because none of the other people in the trial who had been given cribiazin had any effect at all. But about a month or two later, Mr. Wright read an article in a medical journal or some magazine that said all trials involving cribiazin had failed and that it really was not effective at all in treating lymphoma. This immediately caused Mr. Wright to just crash back into the same condition he was in when he was in the hospital before. Tumors returned, chest filled up with fluid. He became easily fatigued, could barely breathe, was back in the hospital and again at death's door. Well, Dr. West was fascinated by this and could not credit the rapidity of change. And so he decided to try an experiment. He told Mr. Wright that while it was true that the carbamazine that he had initially been injected with had proved to be unreliable, there was a new form of carbamazine that was going to come to the hospital in a couple days, and he would be able to give him an injection of it. And this was like a new and improved extra strength carbamazine. And once again, Mr. Wright's enthusiasm for this injection went way up. And 2 days later, Dr. West gave him another injection, but this time it was just saline solution. There was no extra strength carbamazine at all. But the same thing happened. He rallied rapidly, fluid drained out of his lungs, the tumors disappeared, he felt wonderful, and once again checked out of the hospital and went home again. Well, that is pretty astonished, but the cautionary tale part of it is that a month or two later, Mr. Wright read yet another article saying that there was absolutely no question, but carbamazine was a failure and that it was unable to cure anyone. And he once again crashed back into his condition, tumors, fluid in the lungs, checked back in the hospital. And this time, because Dr. West had nothing more to offer him, he died in 2 days. So he yo-yoed up and down on his belief in the power of carbamazine. And when his belief in that was dashed once more by that final article, he died. So this is very, indicative of how important our own deeply held beliefs are about what can and can't heal us. Now, the final story that I love telling is about a woman named Barbara Kumiski. And Barbara, when she was 16, came down with multiple sclerosis. And her condition worsened for the next 15 years. And at the point of this story, she was unable to get out of bed unaided. She needed to have oxygen at all times. She had emaciated muscles that had left her unable to pick things up or walk at all. Her hands had curled in towards her forearms permanently, and her feet had curled up in the same way. And she was about to go. She was very close. Her doctor was talking to her parents about going into hospice. There didn't seem to be any other avenue. But all this while, Barbara Kumiski had a very powerful prayer life. She had tuned in with her parents and with her minister to being a channel to pray for others. And she prayed for hours every day for other people with no thought of any benefit to herself, but it made her feel wonderful. As she put it, she felt like she was a contributing member of the human race. She couldn't serve others in any physical way, but she could serve them through her prayers. And she felt whole and complete within herself, even though her body was not. And one evening, while visiting with a couple of friends, she heard a voice that said, "Get up and walk." And her friends didn't hear it. She heard it only within. But she got up and indeed walked. She took off all the aids that she had to breathing and an IV. And by the time she walked from her bedroom into the living room where her parents were, she had gained weight. Her hands and arms had regained capability, same with her feet and legs. And she was able to do a ballet move that she hadn't been able to do since she was 16. This happened in minutes. She gained 30 or 40 pounds. When she saw her doctor the next day, who had been her physician the whole time she had her condition, he said, all symptoms are completely gone. So these three stories, which I love because they're credible, they've been verified medically, but each one illustrates something different. Anita Moorjani's illustrates the power of emotion. Mr. Wright's illustrates the power of our convictions, of our belief. And Barbara Comiskey's illustrates the power of connecting to spirit in a real way, not just a belief in the possibility of the divine, but actually being a channel for the divine, in her case, of praying. And each of those elements is incredibly key to our own ability to self-heal.
And what I love about that is materialism of science is going to scramble and try to say, okay, well, these things happen because we upregulated something in the DNA, or it's not in the DNA, but it's after the DNA has transcribed, and it's happening in, it's a big thing nowadays to talk about epigenetics. But those processes, as you explain very nicely in your book, The Physics of Miraculous Healing, take time. And right. And when you think about it, each cell has to coordinate their own epigenetics with each other, and then the cells within organs, and then the organs with each other. And that's not going to happen in the minutes it takes to walk from your wheelchair to the living room.
Yes, and that's why modern medicine tends to essentially ignore miraculous healing, because there's nothing in the standard medical model, which is based on biochemistry, molecular biology, which are in turn based on classical physics. There's nothing in any of that that can explain extraordinarily rapid physical change of any kind towards health or away from health. That all of the processes that modern medicine believes to be taking place in cells are slow in relation to the ability to have a transformation of maybe half of the 40 to 60 trillion cells in a human body that it would take for that kind of cure that Barbara Comiskey experienced. So modern medicine, in the old phrase, the old parlance, just doesn't go there. And if pressed, they will often say, well, it was probably a misdiagnosis, that she didn't actually have multiple sclerosis. It was some other thing, some spastic condition that made her unable to move her arms, et cetera. But in these cases I'm talking about and shared with you, they were well documented. They were well diagnosed. There was just no question of the severity of the condition and the condition they were in.
So when we turn and say, well, what can explain it? Then I think that brings us, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but it brings us to ask about the basics of what is the nature of reality. And can we find our explanations outside of biologic processes?
Well, I would say they're not necessarily outside of biologic processes, but
Okay,
they're outside of the biologic processes that are understood by modern medicine. And
okay,
so what I spend a fair amount of time, as you know, trying to explain in my book, with the purpose of really allowing anybody who takes the time to read it to have that kind of aha moment where they can believe that rapid change is possible, that they can believe that miraculous healing is possible and not be mentally resistant to the idea because they think it's impossible based on modern medicine. So that's really my purpose in bringing in a new way of looking at the fundamentals of reality, as you put it, that underlie the physical body. The irony for modern medicine in these days, I think, is their fundamental principles are 100 years out of date. Modern medicine is based on a model of reality that was superseded by Einstein's theory of relativity, by Niels Bohr's quantum physics, by string theory, by M theory, all of these expanding disciplines of physics that are more energy-based than matter-based. The basis, as I mentioned, of biochemistry and molecular biology in terms of physics is classical physics. And classical physics is matter-centered. And matter-centered physics basically looks at reality as having sort of two things. One, if you've got matter and you've got energy, and it can explain the interactions between those two. But matter is essentially immutable. It's just balls of solidity that we think of as, atomic particles. But after classical physics, and we get into the theory of relativity and E equals mc squared and into quantum physics, they're looking at matter as being an illusion, that matter is energy behaving like matter. Matter is energy moving in stable patterns that create this sort of orbiting system of electrons around a nucleus that are all different frequencies of energy working in balance to create this real thing, but it's not matter. So if you
so
start looking at your own reality in terms of your body being made of energy, it starts to open the door to understanding how your body could change faster than is popularly believed.
let's hold that thought because I want to take a short break. And then when we come back, let's really dive into that because this is where the juicy stuff is. So let's take a short break. Hi, everybody. We're back. I'm Doc Martin here with Joseph Selbie. And we're leaving the world of matter and stepping into the world of energy. So, Joseph, how can we talk about the physics of subtle energies and how that's playing a role here in miraculous healing?
Well, one of the stranger discoveries of quantum physics was that physical objects that we tend to think of as being always the same can actually turn into energy waves. It's the same energy, if you will, but in one instance, it's behaving as matter. And in the next instant, it's behaving as waves of energy. And that it can go back and forth.
The particle wave duality.
Correct. Correct. And there's a lot of speculation as to how it's possible that it gets triggered to go into its wave type behavior and stop being in the matter type behavior. But that it can happen has been amply proven. And there are also some recent studies that have been done, experiments have been conducted that indicate we can have parts of our body behaving like waves of energy in quantum states that we don't see, but they're in that other state even while we're active. So for example, there have been experiments done with the brainwave patterns that are detectable in our brain, and they've concluded that the brain's ability to have large portions of the brain operating at exactly the same frequency, which is measured frequently, is only possible if all of those areas of the brain are behaving as waves of energy. In other words, they're all in a quantum state. So we go back and forth, essentially, is what physics is beginning to tell us. And when we're forth, if you will, when we're behaving more like waves of energy and less like matter, we're also, that whatever part of us that is, and just to leave you with a little intriguing thought, when you're asleep, it could be all of you is behaving like waves of energy. When you're in that state, you're really not in the physical universe anymore. You're really not in this realm that we perceive through the senses. We're in what's called non-locality. And the non-local realm, and this is physics, I'm just talking about physics. This is not some woo-woo theory that has been put forward by someone. But physics says non-locality is a pure energy realm. And that when any part of our realm behaves like energy, whether it's part of our bodies or a stone or a house or whatever, it begins to be primarily in non-locality. Now we're capable of going back and forth. So the way I like to put it to people is we always have one foot in the physical world and one foot in this non-local energy world. Now in spiritual teachings, for those of you familiar with them, non-locality corresponds to the astral regions. It corresponds to the heavens. It corresponds to another realm in which everything is luminous. So when our body starts to behave primarily as this luminous body and less or not at all of the physical body, then changes can happen more easily in that subtle energy body. It's more mutable, and it can be affected profoundly, as we see in the instances of Anita Moorjani and Mr. Wright and Barbara Kumisky. It can be affected by emotions. It can be affected by our beliefs, and especially by connecting to our higher self, to spirit. And when we make that deeper connection to that subtle energy body, whatever we change by doing that in the subtle energy body is immediately reflected in the physical body. And that's how miraculous healing can take place.
I'm just thinking, and again, this is in the mystical world, not teaching with physics or anything, but in my shamanic teachings, we were constantly taught that the place that things happen is in the energy body and then transduced to the physical. And the same time, you have another teaching of shamans being able to step outside of space and time. And in the context we're talking, to me, that's saying there's a whole heck of a lot happening in the subtle non-local world, and that shamans learned how to step outside of our 3D material world in order to effect change. Are we talking about the same thing?
Yes, exactly. I mean, those are very good examples. I would qualify slightly this notion that the shaman is stepping out of this world, because the shaman's physical body is probably still there.
Mm-hmm.
But the shaman's awareness has moved completely into the energy world. And we have the same makeup as the shaman, but most of us have not developed the ability to leave the body behind, so to speak, of our awareness and shift our awareness completely into the subtle. But we have that potential. In fact, that's part of what we can do to increase our ability to self-heal, is to become more and more aware of that subtle aspect of ourselves. But the core thing that you were sharing is the core truth here, that if we can learn to affect the subtle energy body, then we immediately affect the physical body. And this is echoed and supported by one of my favorite disciplines of all in physics, because it supports so many things that come to us from more subtle spiritual teachings. But this one in particular really helps explain that connection between the subtle energy body and the physical body. In M theory, it's a fundamental tenet of that discipline. And by fundamental, it means that without this tenet, the whole conceptual framework of M theory breaks down. This is like a pillar in the way they understand reality. And that pillar is that what they call the holographic principle. And they posit, now these are hard-headed physicists, if you want to think of it that way. These are physicists who, if the math doesn't add up, they don't believe it is real. They don't believe it's possible. They have to see real, not so much measurable, because what they're talking about is difficult to measure, but it's got to all add up within the framework of the discipline of physics. And from that perspective, they say the entire physical universe is a holographic projection.
So explain that, because sometimes my mind gets a little blown by that.
It should be blown, because it
Okay,
really
good, 'cause
is
I'm like,
counter
wait,
to the
yeah,
way we think about reality. Most of us were raised, and by most, I mean like 99% of us were raised thinking that the universe was created a long time ago in the Big Bang, and that it then unfolded over billions of years, physical laws governing that unfolding, and then we ended up where we are today with planets and stars and solar
yeah,
systems
these
and life.
random atoms came together and they happened to meet each other, and boom, a chemical was formed, and then boom, that was the nidus for more, and then the whole thing.
Right. So while that is still true in a real way, it's not the whole truth. The universe is still evolving and unfolding, and it is governed by natural laws, but those laws have their origin in the non-local energy world, and that the information that drives the way the universe is unfolding exists in that realm and not in the physical realm. It's as if the movie film exists in non-locality, and the movie that is projected exists in the physical world. So that is true for us individually. Our particular movie film for each one of us is being played from non-locality and projected into the physical world as our physical body. But that film is our subtle energy body. What our subtle energy body looks like, its state of health, all of that is projected into the physical body. And it's continuous. This, I think, is the most hard to wrap our minds around, but that creation is continuous. It's a
So it's
holographic
kind of
process.
like reality TV. You get a live minute-to-minute update. You know, you're constantly remaking yourself.
Yes. Yes.
So then the question is, do we have all the background in place now? But the question is, how can we, each of us, get back into that subtle energy body of ours and effect the change we want?
Well, first, let me just make a gentle correction there.
Okay.
We're always in our energy body.
Okay, good thinking.
And we're always in our physical body as long as we're alive. So we're in both.
Okay.
And I think that going back to your example of the shaman, we are generally, all the people we tend to know and interact with, are generally more fixated on the physical side of us that we can perceive through the senses.
Mm-hmm.
This gives us a very material view of not only the world around us, but of our body and the way our body works. And then, of course, this is underlined and supported by modern medicine. So we have a very, very strong belief system that says this is all we are, that we are only a physical expression as a result of all these natural laws. But we've always been more. And in fact, one of my favorite things to say is that we are much more than we know. Because all this while that we've been thinking we're just physical bodies, we've been creating them. We have been creating them from our subtle energy body that is always there.
So then is it more accurate to say that we just haven't put our awareness there?
Yes, we haven't put our awareness there. And because we haven't been aware of it, most people are unable to appreciate the power of
I was just
emotions.
thinking that. The power, wow.
The power of emotions, the power of our deeply held beliefs, the power of connecting to our higher self. We don't see it because we're lacking that, shamanic awareness, but we can become gradually, deliberately more aware of all of those aspects of ourself and be more deliberate about using them for our better health. If we could see who we really are, if we could see this joining of physical and energy bodies, we would be going, wow, I just had a strong negative emotion. I got angry with someone, and whoa, my whole energy body just distorted and darkened and lost energy. And I could see the connection between that experience and my physical body that literally responded instantly to that. If we could see that kind of thing, we would be much, much more desirous of living in more positive emotions. Now, Anita Moorjani saw this in one near-death experience, which was for her, an extraordinary blessing and a blessing to us, because she gets to be kind of a messenger to us, right? About that power of love. And she herself she just gives workshops on love and how to get back into love because she saw that connection. Also true is if we could see the power of our beliefs manifesting in our physical body, we would want to do everything we could to develop more unlimited beliefs. And finally, we could.
I was never this sophisticated in talking to my patients, but I would often say, and as I learned shamanic teachings, I would probably say it more. If somebody said something, a belief they had, I have gallbladder, my mother has gallbladder, basically fatalistic. It's in my genetics and, family heritage. And so therefore I have X, Y, or Z. And I would say, who says? Who made that rule?
Right.
But the more sophisticated step that you're talking about, and I'm going to put it in a little bit different words, and you tell me if I'm on the right track. If we can be congruent with our inner thoughts, our inner world, and our outer world, that our thoughts and our actions are congruent, take it one step further, that they're actually of a positive, loving, high emotional, new age, we talk about higher vibrational, then we are being in flow through our whole system. Our thoughts, our actions, our emotions. Are we on the right track if we're doing that?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. It seems simplistic until you realize the power of it and you realize the connection between your subtle energies and your physical body. But the reality is that, and I love this quote from Bernie Siegel, the author of Love, Medicine, and Miracles, among other books. He just put it simply. He said, happy people don't get sick. And he didn't mean it to be a Pollyannish, sort of happy people, but people who have that congruence that you're talking about, that they're in connection with positive emotions, they feel good about themselves and others, their thoughts are positive, and they put all that together into that congruent way of being, chances are really high that they're going to be healthy and happy.
And what you said something that it's not, it seems simple, but it's not simple. What's actually quite hard when we as individuals can get triggered by other individuals and the state of the world, to watch our thoughts, to not go down the rabbit hole of grumbling or being pessimistic, which brings me back to what you teach and what you've lived since, gosh, I might date you, but I'm going to say the late 70s. That we need to do a spiritual, well, let's just say a life practice to help keep us in that congruence and to keep us in that life affirming vibe in our thoughts and therefore in our actions. And that's meditation.
Yes. Number one thing I recommend to anyone, for any reason, really, helps with your relationships. It helps with your work, helps with concentration. It helps just feeling a sense of purpose and fulfillment, but it also has a profound effect on our health. So it's not that, unfortunately, we sit down and meditate once and all our health issues go away. Meditation is a methodical practice that allows us to connect to spirit, allows us to connect to our soul nature. And it takes time and care and determination. But as you do it, you'll find that old patterns, which are really the ones that are making you ill, the old patterns of emotional wounds, of limiting beliefs, and of, being essentially out of contact with your true self. All those things will make us unhealthy and even potentially make us even more steadily unhealthy. But the thing that meditation does and other practices that I mention in my book is more proactive. I really recommend that people not get caught up in their past. I don't want to suggest that people should ignore their negative feelings and pretend they're not there. But if you encounter repeatedly negative emotions, it's tempting to try to unravel them too much, to get in and find out, well, where did this happen? Why does it keep happening? What is it that triggers me? And there's a degree that that's useful. But I think far more effective is to figure out how to have positive emotions. I use this example of we're a little bit like a river. And when there's not much flow through our river, not much water moving in that river, at the edges of the river, by the banks, little eddies tend to form. And in those eddies, you'll see leaves and sticks and other odd things just kind of collect in these eddies. And there's lots of them. If we had to hand clear every eddy along our river, it would take forever. But you can get those eddies cleaned out by increasing the flow of water in the river that is you. And increasing that flow comes naturally with lifting your heart into more positive emotions, of having thoughts of unlimited energy, and particularly connecting to spirit. Spirit is like supercharges us to feel energy flowing. And when we have that, it's not that all the, negative experiments that we chose to make in our earlier life just simply vanish. They're still there. They can still be triggered. They can still come back and affect us, but they're far less likely to do so if we stay in that positive flow. And that's really where the power of emotion, belief, and connection to spirit come in, is they transform us. They elevate us. They allow us to transcend lower patterns of behavior and thinking and feeling that we've experienced maybe habitually, and to really move out of them, not in a repressive way, not in a way where we're trying to ignore our past and, force that kind of experience down, which, as we all know, just means it comes up somewhere else unexpected in an unexplainable way, right? You suddenly get outrageously angry at someone for nothing. That's not what this will do for you. What it does for you is really just brings you above and into a higher flow. And as you do that, your health issues will go away. Even significant health issues can go away when you use those soul powers deliberately to elevate yourself.
And when I add to it the awareness that you taught us earlier about physics, that we are constantly being created
Right.
in each moment, then to me, it's really sort of that spiritual adage of just start from now.
Yes.
And because we are literally in the physics world and the mystical world being created from this moment forward. Let's just get in the river right now. Forget about the log jam that was behind us. Get in the river right now, because if we are literally and not just psychologically or metaphorically being created from this moment on, and then this moment, and then this and on, it's sort of, to me, it frees me up. It takes away any worry I have that I have to analyze my childhood and all the bad things that happened and critiqued myself for well, I can create myself from this moment forward. That's kind of freeing and expansive.
And I think what physics does is it underscores the fact that that is literally true, not just metaphorically true.
I know, and
everyone understands this
blows
notion
my
that
brain. It blows my brain, but it's so, there's such power in that very awareness.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. We are so much more than we know. And we don't have to accept that wherever we are in our life right now has some, mechanical hold on us that prevents us from going where we want. There's nothing built into who we are. There's no DNA. There's no tendencies for illness. There's no congenital diseases or anything that can keep us from going in a positive direction if we choose to go in that direction.
Even the tumors are not locked into our future.
No, not if they can vanish in a day.
No, I mean, that's mind-blowing and magnificent. But even the worst illness, the worst cancer, from this moment forward can be created differently.
Yes. Now, I think I don't like to leave the impression as being too simplistic, because what you're changing in order for that to happen are your emotional patterns and your deeply held beliefs. And
Right.
you've developed them over the course of your life. And if you believe in reincarnation, you've developed them even before this life. And they're strong parts of who you are. So you have, any moment is that beginning moment, but it isn't just what you think at that moment in your brain that you're going to go forward with. That's the beginning of the change. So you bring in as much positivity as you can so that it can gradually change those older, more limiting beliefs and those replace those sort of negative habits of emotional experience with positive ones. But you have to keep working at it. It doesn't happen overnight. Now you might say, well, what about all those miraculous stories that seem to happen not only overnight, but instantaneously? And I think in all of those that I would say they are extraordinary, not only in the rapidity of physical change, but they're extraordinary in the degree to which the person's emotional life changed, their beliefs changed, their connection to spirit changed. And they were extraordinarily rapid in all three cases. But that opens the door for us to understand we can go there. We have those same soul powers. We just need to start more methodically than perhaps most of us do to change them, to use them consciously.
So we have a few minutes left. Other than meditation, is there something else that you discuss in your book that you would want the listeners to know about as another practice they could be doing?
I am a firm believer in affirmations. Not everyone likes affirmations because there's this odd sort of cognitive dissonance you have where you're affirming something new and positive that you want to be true in your life. But there's a big part of your brain that's saying, well, you're not that. You're nothing like that. You've never been like that. And that is the power of your old beliefs writ large. So people get a little discouraged with affirmations thinking, well, I've done it and I didn't see anything happen. Or I've done it for a week and I don't see anything happen. The real way to use an affirmation is choose something that you can think of as the antidote to a attitude or a belief that you really would like to overcome. And do it methodically, regularly, powerfully, until you believe it more than you believe its negative side. And this can take weeks, can take months, and you might need to, keep fluffing it up, so to speak, and repeating that affirmation, even if you've stopped using it for a while. But the key is do it until you believe it. You can do it in meditation. You can do it after you meditate, but do it with deep concentration. And you'll find that it can transform deep beliefs that you really don't have any other access to.
Wonderful. I love that. Well, we're going to close, but I wanted to share with the listeners that Joseph and I are talking about having him do some teachings in my shows, probably after the first of the year. We have to flesh it out yet, on consciousness, because I have so many questions, and he has studied the physics and he knows the spiritual and the access to awareness and consciousness. So I'll keep everybody posted about when we will do that. We're still working on the details. But Joseph, as always, I love hanging with you. I love learning from you. And Joseph's book, The Physics of Miraculous Healing, you can buy that. When is it out? Is it out now?
It is out. You can buy it on Amazon or all the usual online retailers. There's an Audible version that's coming out in, I think, 3 or 4 days, but you can pre-order it now. So it's ready to go if you want to experience it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was wonderful having you here. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Emily, thanks for running the show from behind the scenes. Good night, everybody. You've been listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin. Tune in next time while the doc talks health, spirituality, and the impact your beliefs have on every part of who you are, body and soul. Doc Martin unpacks the challenges we face as human beings and teaches callers to open the door between the scientific and the mystical. To learn more about Doc Martin and Maximum Medicine, visit www.sharonmartinmd.com.